Hello and welcome back to another episode of me doing my NPR voice. This is Darcy Melton with Only a Bag.
I love that intro. I think you could just make that the intro.
That should be our intro from now on. Okay.
And I'm Nathaniel Mellor, and this is Planet Only. I don't want to get sued by NPR.
Yes.
So, Only a Bag.
We have nothing to do with NPR.
Yeah.
We're just doing our podcast voices.
It's good for them though, like being known as the NPR voice.
Yeah,
It's kind of
absolutely.
amazing. Like, I mean, most people say NPR radio
free
voice
branding.
than radio voice,
Mm-hmm.
So what are we talking about today? Because it can't be NPR.
It's not that. No, we're talking about travel finances.
We are. We're going to be talking a bit about, I guess, like, I think it's like financial literacy is the technical term. Something that you and I had very, very little of before we went traveling.
Mm-hmm.
Not in a bad way. I realize we're going to start giving a lot of advice from here on.
We've learned things since
but we've
then.
learned a ton. And I think this is going to be split up into 3 episodes.
Yes, that's the plan.
Yeah, so 3 special episodes. The first one is kind of the do's and don'ts before you leave home, mostly around getting euros, getting prepared, and then we're going to go into like debit cards and ATMs, and then we're going to go into credit cards / points and miles reward programs, basically. And I guess that's the 3rd episode. So in this episode, we're mainly putting those words together. Going to be talking about what to do before you leave, I guess, is a good way to put it.
And then probably what you do when you get there immediately.
So the sort of, because a lot of this is for this sort of immediate arrival and then the time leading up to it.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's first?
So I guess the first thing is to notify your bank. And if you have a credit card, notify your banks of where you're going to be going, when your itinerary,
Yeah, for sure. I think that was something I had to do in 2013 when I first went traveling. They basically are like, if you're going to go travel, come into your local branch and tell us where you're going to go. And we'll put a little flag on your account. And it basically is like, if you get a purchase from these countries, don't flag it. And I think I was quite, I don't know, I had a lot of expectations at the time. So I was just like giving them a list. I'm like, North Africa, I'm going to go to maybe Central, who knows? I'll throw some Asian countries in there. I don't know.
You're trying to be real cool.
I was trying to be I was just like, I have to go through Kazakhstan, obviously, to get to China. I don't know. I did like airplanes didn't exist. So I was just like.
In your mind.
In my mind.
Exist?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
In 2013, I think we had airplanes. I'm pretty sure. But I was like, no, I'm going to do the whole thing by like train. I really don't understand what I thought the train system was like. I don't know, the Orient Express. So I was really prepared. I was like, y'all better not flag anything. So they didn't, which is great. But also, in hindsight, they probably should have. So that's something, all that is to say is you absolutely should probably do that. Mm-hmm. However, you ready to say something?
Well, you can do it online and through the app now, right?
Yeah,
with most banks.
Yeah, most banks have that. I guess they have their bank app. And you can just sort of like tell them that you're going to be gone.
Mm-hmm. So you don't have to be all cool going into the bank like you were.
I know,
that's
but
probably
it felt
still
really
an
nice.
option, but it might be easier to do it online through the app.
Well, and also we have a Capital One credit card, and we will be talking about that in our credit card episode. But some of the cards, like the Capital One credit card, will just say, "Don't worry about letting us know. Like we'll figure it out," which I don't know how they figure it out, but I think rest assured they will. And
I mean, it's worked out for us so far.
Yeah, we've sometimes spent like money in 3 different countries in the same day. Like, I mean, we'll fly out of Italy and spend money, get into New York, or fly to New York, go to Italy, and then go to France or something like that, and then never get flagged on it. I mean, it's never been turned off the card, and they've been pretty good though about tracking like purchases that aren't ours. So that being said, yeah, I mean, it's nice though. I think on our debit cards we did it, even though they say you don't have to. I still put in all the countries we go to just to be like super extra safe, because the last thing we want is in a place where we have no phone service and no money. So yeah, if you're nervous about of that, I would definitely go ahead and contact your bank and let them know what you're doing. And then I think that's pretty much it for that number 1 tip.
Yeah. The next thing is getting euros out, or just being prepared with money before you go on your trip. So whenever I first went traveling, I went to my bank and I basically exchanged dollars in my account for euros that they gave me in cash. Like I made a little order and they had them ready. And I thought that was going to be super important. I got out what feels like a lot of money. I don't know how much it was. If it was like 500 euros, 1,000 euros, I can't remember, but it felt like a lot at the time. But since then, I've realized that we can pretty much use a debit or credit card throughout your entire trip up until you get on the ground wherever you're going. Obviously, to purchase your plane ticket, you're going to be using a credit or debit card. Whenever you get somewhere like Rome, for example, is a good way to think about it. To get a taxi from the airport or to get a train ticket, you can use a credit or debit card, and then get cash out. When you land, essentially.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's very easy.
Well, I think that's the thing. I mean, even like you mentioned the taxi, there's an app for the taxi that you can put your card information into. Obviously, the train ticket machines all take card. I mean, even the person walking around taking the tickets has a little card reader.
Yeah.
I mean, as well as he has a bundle of cash, but they always have a card reader. So it's,
Actually, now that I'm thinking about it to that point, now using Rome as an example, some of their all the buses have a tap situation.
that's a good point.
So you can tap for your bus fare, I guess is what it's called.
Yeah, yeah.
That's really a very Rome specific example. Not every city has that, or small town if you're landing in a small town. But
But if you're going to Rome, actually, it's a good, and we'll talk about that, I think, in the Rome episode. But when we were just there this past summer, that was a new thing for us, was you always had to get a ticket beforehand. And sometimes that meant like missing buses and trains and stuff like that because you couldn't figure out where to buy one. And then now I think all the trams, the buses, well, the trains, I could think for years, you could tap at the turnstile. But the buses was always a weird one because it was like, we're in the middle of nowhere. There's nowhere to get a ticket, and I need to get on the bus.
which isn't how it's going to be if you're landing at a major
For
airport.
sure not. No,
But-
I meant more like one of those weird, like, helping somebody. I don't know. The one time we dropped off my mom, and then we took the bus to the wrong direction, and we're just like, I think we're outside of Rome now.
It's like that SpongeBob episode where they like drive out of Bikini Bottom and down
they're
that
like,
cliff.
that was
and
a horrible decision.
Yeah,
that was
that's
kind
what
of
happened
us.
to us.
Yeah. Like, it's a little weird. I mean, we didn't drive off a cliff. We were totally fine, and it wasn't a sketchy part of the town. It was just really
just
far outside
odd.
of Rome.
Yeah.
But it was nice that we didn't have to, I guess, buy another ticket. Like, had we had to buy a ticket, it would have been weird.
But that's all to say that you can use card essentially.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go to your bank in the U.S. and get out a whole bunch of euros. You can if you're more comfortable that way, but you can absolutely get here most likely using card, and then get cash when you arrive here. I think
Yeah,
the first thing you'll probably need cash for, maybe a coffee. If you want a coffee, it's €1. But your tourist tax at the hotel, right?
Yes, that's a big one.
Which is, it's what, like €1 to €3 a night?
I think it
usually?
depends. Yeah, like I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Venice had any more expensive one because I don't.
But it varies from city to city, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's a federal rate. I think it's a local city. There might be a federal rate for like in general, like it might be like 50 cents, but I think it's like €1 or 2 or 3. I think
Okay.
Rome is like 150 or 2.
But you have to pay that in cash, and they'll
Yes,
calculate it
yes.
per night. And it always, like, I think the first time we saw it, it seemed really sketchy. And every time I see it or remember that we have to do it, it feels sketchy, but I know very much that is a real thing.
I think that's cool because not to be like, oh, well, North Macedonia, but we actually found that they had a cap on it. I think at 2 weeks or something like that.
Yeah,
They're
I
like, if it's
forgot
been
about
more than
that.
2 weeks, we'll just start ignoring the.
Like, you live here now. It's
Yeah,
fine.
exactly. Which was great though, because I think it was like it ended up being, I don't know, it's like $1.50, $2 a person a night, and we're like, okay, but after 2 weeks, that's more than $40 together. So are we sure we're doing this? I mean, it's super cheap. Besides that, it just was like one of those things where if you're staying for a few weeks, you might notice that like, oh, I didn't think about that. And yeah, you will need cash for that. A lot of places won't take card or won't take anything else. It's like we want cash, or I think I could be wrong. Like Booking or some lady has you can pay it online.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like paying the city tax ahead of time. But most of them don't have that option. Most of those booking things, like even Airbnb, are like you have to pay when you get there. And I think they'll even tell you like have cash ready for when you land. So that as you mentioned, that's probably the first time you're going to need cash. So what else and what are the do's and don'ts?
I was going to ask you the same question.
Well, because the next episode which will be here any second now because we're going to put them all three up at the same time, is going to be about ATMs and checking accounts. I thought maybe we could talk very briefly on what to look for in an ATM and what to avoid in an ATM.
Yeah, okay. So that's a great idea. Thinking about how you're going to need cash when you get to wherever you're going. You can just go to a regular bank ATM to get that cash out. So our suggestion is to not use ATMs in train stations. Certainly don't use like the freestanding ones that you see around town that are not connected to a bank. I know Italy, often you'll see ones that are connected to the little like news stands, the little edicola.
Yeah.
I don't trust those. I don't think you trust
No.
those. So we suggest that you find one that is either like right outside of a bank, attached to the bank, or actually going into the bank where the ATM is. And we always give them a little wiggle.
Well, I was going to say, like, part of the reason when we say don't trust, I just want to throw out, it's not that these are fake ATMs or something.
Oh, yeah.
These are just because they are typically in unwatched or unsurveilled, unsecured areas. And so you won't really know if somebody puts a card reader or card skimmer specifically over the one that's already there. I know that, like, every year in the States, especially like, every year around Christmas time, there's always stories of, like, finding card skimmers at gas stations, at Target. I think Target actually like a couple of years ago was a big news because everyone's like,
Yeah.
how did people not realize it was at the card machine? But no, I mean it's usually like there's some sort of news about how like there's card skimmers basically picking up information and details and PIN numbers and the whole 9 yards. And obviously ATMs are a great place to do that. So all that is to say is when we say we don't trust the freestanding ones or the ones at the train station, it's just they aren't always watched, for lack of a better word, and they're not constantly checked. Like the ones at banks are typically there's somebody that will check them, which is just to kind of give them a wiggle to make sure the whole thing there's nothing glued on top or even a whole fake facade over the ATM. That happens sometimes. So that is a thing we look for. I think we always go inside a bank, and if you can't go inside a bank, we'll go to the outside of a bank. But also and something we thought of today is the post office will almost always have an ATM attached, and it looks like you can't use a regular debit card there because they'll say like Postamat instead of Bancomat, because the post office in Italy is the largest bank, I believe.
And people have like post pay cards, which is
It's
basically a debit card
yeah.
through the post office.
I mean, I guess it's funny. The United States Postal Service used to have a bank account.
Really?
Yeah,
I
it's
didn't know
like a
that.
pretty massive bank. Like people would, like, and then I don't know what happened. I don't know if it closed or if it sold. Like it's basically the government sold it or what happened. But used to be one of the biggest banks was the post office bank.
Interesting.
So Italy still has the post office bank. And so if you see the Postamat, which is yellow, Italy's postal service, I guess, is yellow. That's their color. So if you see a yellow Postamat, Bancomat type thing, typically it's quite safe. It's high turnover in the sense that tons of people are using it.
Yeah. And it is like the bank, like it's checked on, and I mean, it is a bank.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it's
So it's
not as
quite
sketchy.
protected. And they're well, actually, we can talk about it in just a second and then reiterate it in the next episode. But ATM fees, the Postamat typically, as far as we found, won't have any ATM fees at all. They'll say like your bank might be issuing a fee for using something out of your network, but we don't.
Right.
We don't fee you for this. So if you are, and we'll talk about it again in the next episode because we talk about debit cards and checking accounts and the whole 9 yards. But if that's something that is concerning to you, the yellow ATMs basically attached to post offices are usually pretty safe for both safety and for not getting docked an ATM fee.
Yeah. And for so long, we didn't realize that we could use them with our American cards or accounts, but you totally can.
Absolutely. And on the note of ATMs, you mentioned earlier, one of the ones we do typically use or we trust are the ones in airports.
Yes, absolutely. Because, I mean, they're in an airport, and it's like someone is keeping an eye on them more than a random one on the street.
And a lot of them are bank affiliated, we found.
That's right. Yeah, that's true.
Like they'll have which bank they're affiliated with, obviously at the top, instead of I don't know, it's like Eurostar, Euro something is like there's just a giant brand of ATMs that just sort of operate everywhere in Italy. And that's like a private one, so they charge their own fees and the whole 9 yards. It's sort of like, I don't know, in America, there's like random ATMs around.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think like at bars that only take cash, you'll find an ATM near it, or like
Yeah, and they're run by like the ATM company.
yeah, exactly. It's like somebody just has like a private ATM. I don't really know how that works. Rather than I guess a bank, because I'm trying to think of like banks have their ATMs, but then, well, I don't think anybody really uses bus stops and train stations as much as they used to in America. But I'm thinking even airports. I mean, we travel quite a bit. And I can't remember the last time I saw an ATM in an airport in the States.
In America? Yeah. I don't know. It's a good
Which
question.
is not to say they don't exist. It's just like, oh, where is that? And then one last thing before we wrap up this quick little episode, we figured giving you 3 quick episodes would be easier to refer to than one long giant episode where we ramble on, is the currency conversion counters.
Yeah.
As popularly seen in airports.
Yeah. So I wouldn't use them. You made a good point earlier when we weren't recording that if you have extra denomination, like when you were in Iceland, you had extra kroner. Is that how you said it? So then you used one to convert them into euros.
Right.
But I don't think I've ever used one because their rates are terrible, and I've just happened to not have leftover cash that I needed to convert into something else, you know?
Yeah. And I think if I like, and now you mentioned that was the thing. If you're doing like the backpacking, if you're doing the traveling around, if you're doing multi-country hopping, even within Europe, I think Norway and Switzerland don't use euros as well, or maybe they use them, but they have their own. I think the Switzerland uses a franc. I have no idea what Norway uses. I have the kroner maybe, or something. There's something else that some of these countries use. Also the pound, if you're coming from the UK. And also, I mean, a lot of Eastern Europe that is not part of the EU obviously use non-euros as well. So if you're going around a little bit, if you're spending 3 months hopping around and Italy is only one small portion of your trip, you might find yourself with a handful of various denominations. So yeah, you can totally exchange those in if you're not using them as souvenirs. One thing we found, though, is you can really only exchange higher bills. Like for American dollars, it'd be the 100 and the 50. Some places you take the 20. Most places don't take a 10 and a 5 and a 1. So you're just don't like just bring a handful of cash that you have lying around. You have to kind of come purposely with it. But yeah, as you mentioned too, the airports give worse exchange rates than the ones in the city. But even the cities don't give great exchange rates. It's
just not. I guess in my mind, planning wise, it doesn't make sense to plan on using those. If you have to, you totally can. Like they're safe, but it's not an economical plan. Like it's better to use an ATM when you're here in the country, or if you need to get cash out of your bank before you leave home.
And I think like on that note, there are definitely in some countries you have to use them. I think I read somebody's story about Iran recently, and they were basically saying that because there's government exchange rates that are twice as bad as the black market exchange rate. So you have to go to black market places to exchange money. And I mean, while there are potentially a lot more countries like that, I don't think Italy is one of them. The exchange rate is just simply high. I wouldn't say predatory. I wouldn't say like, it's not like, I mean, right now I think it's $1.07 or $1.08 is a euro. So you might see like $1.15, $1.16 at a currency exchange place. You wouldn't see like $1.40 or something like that at a currency exchange place. That is just
predatory.
Straight up terrible. But that's just something to keep in mind. Like you don't really need to go to them unless you feel like you have a bunch of extra cash lying around. And then vice versa, like coming back to the States, you don't necessarily need to convert it back to dollars if you want to, unless you have like, again, you took a couple €100 out thinking you're going to need it. You never spend it because you use the card everywhere. And you think, I don't really want to go back to the States with €400 in cash. Then it's not a bad idea to use it and just go ahead and take the slight loss on the currency conversion.
Actually, speaking of exchanges, we didn't talk about this yet. I have family who have given me like francs before, and not the Swiss franc, but the French franc that is completely out of use. You cannot use those anymore. Likewise, the lira does not exist in Italy anymore. I mean, you will still in like shops that have held merchandise for a really long time. Sometimes you'll still see the like 2,000 lira for this notebook. It's quite cool, but you can't actually use lira to buy anything.
And you can't convert them either, because it used to be for years you can go to the bank afterwards. I say for years, it might have been like 2 weeks. I honestly don't know how long it was, but for a time afterwards you could go and convert it, and then they stopped allowing it. So if you have a bunch of lira or francs or something like that lying around, you obviously can't use them. But actually, and I just want to mention, because we had this problem coming back, somebody was very sweet to us and gave us 50 euros before we came back to Italy in the spring. And they're like, I haven't been to Italy in years. So this is from like 2009, 2010. They're like, I don't know if it's still good. I'm like, no, it's 50 euros. It's they still use the euro. We're fine. And we ran into the problem of like, no one really wants to take a 50 euro bill that's missing a lot of the security features, which I guess is the same thing in the States. Like I worked at a grocery store, and you don't want to take a $100 bill that's from 1980 because it's like there's no security features on that, and it's so much easier to forge.
It was also kind of beaten up too.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people were just like, I totally trust you, but I can't take it because it could be someone else faked it and roughed it up and made it look like an old 50 euro bill.
Yeah.
You believed them. I believe you. You seem trustworthy, but I just can't take it,
Well, I think that's the thing, because in the States, as long as more than 50% of the bill is visible, they will exchange it, like the bank will exchange it for a fresh one, no questions asked. So like a grocery store, there's no real harm in taking 62% of a $10 bill, but here I'm not entirely sure that's the same thing, because a lot of people are like, no, it's a little ripped here, I can't take it. Like,
what did we end up doing with that 50 euro bill?
We actually ended up bringing it to the post office and paying rent with it. We asked, can you take this because you're a bank? And they're like, yeah. I mean, he was a little suspect, but he ran the tests and all that, and he's like, yeah, no, it's fine, it's 50. So that's all to say is, if you are someone who like myself, I have uncles who travel a lot and always bring back money, and one of their for years, like one of their gifts was just like giving me their currency from other countries, because I would love it and collect it. And then obviously when I was coming to those countries, I'm like, oh, I already have money from those countries, I'm going to be set up when I go. No, and I found out that like, oh, some of it doesn't work. You're going to have to you're going to have to basically figure out a way to exchange that when you get to the country. And in this case, we're talking about euros. So if you have any euros from like a trip you took 10 years ago, or a family member or a friend took 10 years ago, and they're giving it to you,
you could try going to the bank to exchange it. Yeah. But like lira and francs and old money, you can't.
Old money, yeah. But also coins, you're totally fine. Coins are pretty much no security features. They still use coins from like 92, 91 in circulation. I mean, you get a handful of coins these days, and it's like the €1 from 1990 and the €1 from last year look exactly the same still.
You could have 50 euros worth of coins and be totally fine, rather than the bill from 10 years ago.
Yeah. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Also, dollars don't work here. Some people bring American dollars and try to use them as currency. Actually, your dad happened to be able to manage that somehow. I don't know.
He's that, I love him, and he's that kind of traveler. Always carries like $50 American with him, just to be like, everyone's going to take a $50 American bill, and I'm like, well, I hope so, because you're counting on that.
And a cab driver took it. I mean, for like a 20 euro fare or something, but that's the only time I've ever heard of it actually working.
And I think that's the thing. I mean, again, it's not bad. Like if you keep $100 like dollar bill as a spare, like in an emergency, it's probably not the end of the world. Somebody will help you out. If you're like, I have 100, I need to make a phone call, I need to XYZ. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's some sort of really big emergency situation. They might help you, but like, if you go to a hotel and be like, I have $100 cash for a 60 euro night room, they're like, I don't care. It's 60 euros. If you could figure out how to give me 60 euros, yeah, we got, we can do some business. But yeah, no, dollars, quite worthless. And I guess on the last note, and then we'll make this a nice, tight, short, longer than needed to be episode, is check the exchange rates before you come. Mm-hmm. I probably should have mentioned this back in the currency conversion section of this podcast. But no, we talked to somebody recently, and we've I think this is the fourth time we recorded this part, I realize, and we still can't remember who it is we talked to recently. But we talked to somebody recently who was surprised to learn that the dollar was much weaker, or not much weaker, but weaker than the euro. Mm-hmm. They'd thought that they were American. To be clear, I get it. Like if you're like, oh, I don't know, the dollar seems strong, the euro seems strong, I just assumed one was stronger. No, they were American, who was just like surprised when they got out 40 euros, and they're like, how does it cost me more in dollars? So this is just something to keep your eye on the exchange rates. Rarely, and I mean once in the last 20 years, has the dollar been more powerful than the euro. And that was last year, and it was a beautiful moment for all of us who are American expats who are paid in dollars and who just watch our bank accounts dwindle away every month because of the conversion fees, or it's the fact that the euro is stronger. Conversion rate, yeah. Thank you. So yeah, no, that's just something to keep in mind. Just keep your eye on it, just so you know And you can kind of do some quick mental calculations anytime you're paying for something. Like if it's like 40 euros, you could be like, all right, that's like, I don't know, 44 bucks, something like that. I always like to have just an idea about specifically percentages of how much more I'm paying. Like if it's 10%, if it's 6%, if it's 18% more. And then it's a little easier for me to go shopping and not go an overdraft or something like that. Not that any of our dear listeners are going to overdraft while they're in Europe, but that's just something to keep in mind. And I think that's it for this episode on this happy note.
Yeah, we're going to talk about debit cards next and checking accounts.
Yeah, and checking accounts. Yeah. What to look for, what to avoid, what we prefer, what makes a good checking account and debit card. And then after that, we'll talk about credit cards.
Yeah.
And in the link in the description, there'll be links or affiliate links, referral links to a handful of credit cards that we like, that we personally use, that we find the best for traveling. So if any of those catch your fancy, please feel free to sign up. I mean, we're going to talk about credit cards in the third episode, and these all coming out at the same time. So hopefully you'll all have listened to the credit card episode first, but I figured just in case I'll throw them in all
yeah, if you have something that you're like, oh, I'm going to get this, you know what? I'll help them out by using their link. That's what it is.
Deeply appreciative.
And we should have said this beforehand, but we are not financial advisors. None of this is, I mean, it's financial advice, but it's not from experts. We're just friend to friend giving the advice that we give to everybody who comes to Europe to visit us and who's planning a trip. And especially with credit cards, or I mean, anytime with money, if you are not comfortable doing something, absolutely don't do it. If you don't understand how checking accounts work, debit accounts work, don't open one until you understand what it is. Even more so with credit cards. If you feel uncomfortable with getting a credit card or don't understand credit, absolutely, we are not encouraging you to open up an account.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a good way to put it. Especially because I realized we probably could have also mentioned at the beginning, not only are we not financial consultants, this is just sort of the advice we give to everybody who's going to go traveling for the first time. Not even for the first time. I mean, I'm thinking about like my uncle who's been traveling hundreds of times and who'd never really considered that there are debit and credit cards out there that like won't charge him just through the nose just to get his own money abroad. So that's just something we really wanted to impart because we've just been meeting people recently who, I mean, one of the biggest gripes right off the bat, not a gripe, but, you know, one of the biggest things, like, how you doing? How you adjusting to being in Italy? Is like, oh my God, I can't believe how much, how expensive it is to get my own money from the bank. So
it's things that we forgot we didn't know when we first went traveling.
That's a good way to put it,
we happen to have this information, so why not share it?
Exactly. So if you want to support us, there are some referral links for credit cards in the description. They all have these, they're basically only for new card members, so I should also warn you there, like if you're a Capital One member, you can't get the new card bonus. If you still want the card, please go for it. That'd still be amazing. It would still help you travel. But I think they all offer bonuses that are only for new card members. So with that being said, thank you so much for listening to this very short episode, 28 minutes. Barely an episode at all on credit card, not even on credit cards. That was the end. What are we talking about this episode? On do's and don'ts of financial traveling.
Yes, you got it. All right, we're going to talk to y'all next in the next episode about debit cards and checking accounts.
Perfect. And until next time.